let me first just welcome you to Living Between Worlds, those of you who are back again and those of you who are here for the first time. This is a 4-year running conversation that I began in the early days of COVID, struck by the confluence of the pandemic crisis and the climate crisis and what's come to be called the meta crisis and the parallels and weirdnesses of all those. And inspired by 2 quotes, really, one from Antonio Gramsci, Italian revolutionary, who about 100 years ago said that the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to be born. And between them is the time of monsters. And in a somewhat different mood, the wonderful Arundhati Roy, who said, there's a new world coming. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. So here we are. And we're very honored and thrilled to have as our special guest, Carol Sanford. Carol is Carol, it's hard to describe you in a few words. I'm going to let you do most of it, but Carol is a legendary and notable and very unusual business consultant who's worked with companies as diverse as Procter & Gamble and Seventh Generation and Numi Tea and many others with an approach that is not what you usually hear from most consultants, sustainability consultants, regeneration consultants, what have you. Her latest book, her 7th book, No More Gold Stars, subtitle is about how getting people to think for themselves and moving away from the kind of programmatic, mechanistic approach that we've lived in for, I was going to say so many years, but probably so many decades or centuries. I first learned of Carol through my once upon a time ago business partner, Bill Reed, one of the generators of the LEED rating system, who dove deep into Carol's work on purpose and essence and how that feeds the work of regenerating land and communities. And I've followed her work for years. Unfortunately, I regret this, Carol, from the periphery. We've not worked together, but I've been inspired by what you've done. I've been reading your 3 most recent books over the last week since we decided to do this. And I will say no more except to say that I just have great respect. I'm honored for you to be here. And in contrast to our usual approach on calls, we're going to just give the mic to Carol. And she will run the way she chooses to do, which that is one of the things that she does. Let me just say one other thing by way of introduction. Carol's in an advanced diagnosis of ALS. The result of that is that her motor functions are not as they were. So her speech is slower and may sound a little garbled to you, but rest assured, there is full-on unrestrained mind going on behind those eyes. So strap in. What would be, I think, a really rich and thrilling call. Carol, over to you.
Along those lines, Gil, Carol has said, if you don't understand something, please speak up and ask her to repeat it. She's happy to do so.
Right.
And let me just say again, speaking up, please speak up through the chat. If we have people popping in and out on mic, it'll mess up the video editing. So we'll monitor the chat. And bring your questions through the chat, except when Carol opens the floor up for you, if she does that. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Carol, go ahead.
Thanks, Gil, and thanks all of you for showing up. I also lament that Gil, you and I have not crossed paths more deeply over time. I do see a few names on here I recognize and have crossed paths with, so it's nice to see you all. First, I don't answer questions, so it'll be zero help to you to put any question in chat. That is a very old paradigm, as though I know the answers and you don't. I hate that, so there'll be no Q&A. However, if you are in the breakouts, which we're going to be in, you can exchange questions and develop your own best thinking. The way I decided to proceed today is the way I think I always do, which is work with you developing your own thinking out of your own lived experience. But what I offer are premises off of which I work and a way to think about them and develop an extension of those from your own life. It requires, partly because my speaking, I get very tired, my mouth wears out which is most annoying since I'm most used to engaging with people directly. But I'm finding that being able to write a few things down, talk about them, but make sure you can understand what I was intending is very helpful. We're gonna then be in a breakout group for a bit of time. And Ken, I meant to give you the what do they call it, co-host, or can you do that, or give me co-host so I can control my slides?
I will, Guild, I think you have to make her a co-host because
I
I
will
am a
do it.
co-host.
Give me a second.
And Ken, if you would prepare for people to go in breakouts in about 15 minutes to play with some of the things I'm going to throw out about the groups of three, that would be great. And this is a very important part of my epistemology. I do not value expert epistemology or authoritative. I think they break down our ability to think. And so you putting together your ideas to bring back is a very important part. Let me see if I have.
Carol, did you say you wanted 3 people per breakout? Is that correct?
That's my plan. I
Okay.
still don't have. Okay, there I am. All right, I should be able to share a screen. Um, It's asking me strange questions, Gil. Like, do I want to start screen share because it'll stop sound? I would love it actually if people hid their faces. They're beautiful, but they're very distracting to have 18 faces on the screen, and they make it hard for us to engage with the few ideas I'm writing. Thank you. I appreciate that. Keep hiding yourself. It's also very distracting. Okay, I'm gonna try and put up some ideas here. All right, I titled today something that is kind of at the heart of my new book, not kind of, but is really at the heart, which is the ability of us to regenerate the capacity to think for ourselves. And I think most of us can't even see, including me. I fight it all the time, not to draw on sources that are other than myself, or the challenge. I always say to my students, don't trust me ever about anything. Could I get the last few people to turn off your cameras? Alan and
If you don't know how to
Dan.
do that, click on your image. You'll see little dots. Click on that and say hide self view.
Catherine and Shell and Ken. And it's usually on the nav bar also. Catherine, can you do that? Catherine Alexander, can you hide yourself? And Shell.
Looks like I can do it also. So I'm going to hide you if you haven't done it. There we go.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. Now I'm not, and maybe as people come in, help them hide themselves like Jane.
We'll just do that. Okay.
Okay. All right. Now, I am insistent about this because attention is such an important part of us being able to think and engage. And when we have all these new screens around us, it's constantly pulling our attention because we're very visual beings. And so if we can even in breakout sometimes do better that way. All right. So the new book, it's called No More Gold Stars. And I'm going to give you a 1-slide overview of the book and then proceed. So one of the things about my work is it's was triggered by a man named Thomas Kuhn when I was a undergraduate at UC Berkeley, and he was a visiting scholar. And he had just published a book called The Structure of the Scientific Revolution. I was in his class and in some Rathskeller meetings at coffee shop in the evening, and he introduced the idea to us that most of you now take for granted, but it did not always was not always a part of our lexicon. When we asked him how you have people shift paradigm, he said, "That's your job." I figured out the idea, and we all laughed. I created a framework when I was 27. That was about 6 or 7 years after that conversation. Gave me a way to work with it, and I'm going to share with you an early version. I discovered that simultaneous all these paradigms at work, but they're not a set of doings. They're a worldview. They're a way of seeing things. And the most common one is the Christian worldview and the military worldview and the business worldview, which we might call extract value. Everything is there for our benefit, and we need to have dominion over an individual access. After quite a few decades and even centuries of operating from this lower paradigm, good, well-intended folks begin to say, well, we need something a bit more. We need to stop the destruction of the dominion we're working with. And the environmental paradigm was formed. The stop waste, the reduce harm. Now, both of these still exist, and they run in parallel all the time. And the people who are in arrested disorder usually feel much better about themselves, not knowing that sometimes their very way of working on trying to stop the extract value is quite limited. In the last, I'd say 20 or 30 years, the idea popped up, well, we don't want to just do less harm, we want to do good. And then people really felt good about themselves. But this view is primarily a humanist view as it's exercised and very anthropocentric. You actually see things on LinkedIn and Twitter that say human-centered, not understanding. It means you view everything from the point of view of humans. The other thing with the do good is it falls into ideologies where certain ideals are proselytized, and this is how colonizing comes about and trying to move other people's thinking to ours. So this is, it's not like we need some of each of these. What we need is a new worldview, a new paradigm, and it doesn't come out of any of these because these are all limited. Though what I have been writing about for almost 50 years now is regenerate wholes. So you learn to see whole system like a life shed. Instead of doing something to it or fixing it with a mission, missions are do good, visions are do good. Instead, you evolve the capacity of the life shed to do its own work and learn to have each entity express essence. Now, we don't have time to go through the details of that today, but in the book I talk more. And by the way, I just started book 8, which I'm kind of excited about, but on to today. Now, the real thing that happens is we build capability to climb up these paradigms as we're really increasing the scope of consciousness we can exercise over living and by exercise, I mean in our own mind. we can manage our mind and what we take into account. So I'm going to talk to you more about why, if we can't learn to think for ourselves, we can't do the stop one because we're so conditioned. And how did that happen? A little over 100 years ago, maybe 120, in the early 20th century, we had a fundamental shift in how we could know things and how we could learn and how reality was examined. Up until then, people ran farms and could feel the living system around them. Their families worked with them. Much was embedded in small local family and community, and the working together was much more about understanding alike. But in the early 20th century, the behaviorists came into existence, and they were trying to get to be a well-known, recognized, fundable entity. And they moved our way of sourcing all from a self-determining way to an authoritative way. In other words, external authorities had to be certified as experts, particularly PhDs in psychology. I was in school and while getting my PhD in when was it, the 70s. It was going through this process, but the process was no longer where you really were learning to think for yourself. It was much more about getting the right people to authorize me to be able to say things. The process that happened in schools and family is we stopped developing living system thinking. Instead, and also stop inner work, looking at educational system or parenting, stop working on inner being. It all became about knowledge transfer and the certification that we completed that. The result was that we shifted to a positive science, which meant someone else broke it down into small things, dissected it. I'll tell you funny story. My daughter graduated from Swarthmore College in biology, never having dissected any animals. She was given an honorary award, and they named the entry class about learning to study holes at work. And I was amazed that the school pulled this off, let her pull this off, because she refused to use a positive science test, the static where you cut the frogs up, study their parts, and extrapolate that to some kind of average, what the humans were. Excuse me, I have to take a breath. So we change how we know things during this early window, and so much revolved around people in behavior schools taking what they knew from animal science and substituting it for human understanding and development. Now, again, I can't go through this today, but I have a whole chapter, well documented, that shows it was intentionally put into education, parenting, business policy, even churches, resulting in errors. So we're working from a very fragmented system that is working from understanding parts and pieces. Now, I personally believe it's the source of what we have breaking down in democracy, our inability to govern, solve wicked problems like climate change, creates fake news. And so I'm making a very big claim here. And I have in the last 3 books that if we keep trying to work on do less harm and reduce, and do good, that we are continuing to fragment. So I'm going to show you today that this is an overview of the first third of my book. But the real question of interest to us today is, what do we need to do to make it work? I'm going to give you the 6 primary disciplines I believe need to be developed in us as humans and used in our work. And I'm going to ask you to do your own personal exercise as we move along. We'll probably only get through the first half, but the book's are 99 cents in Kindle right now. So easy to get the other 3. All right, if you would create 6 lines, down the left-hand side, say lower paradigm, like the extract value, reduce harm, and on the right-hand side, put whole paradigm. You're gonna rank yourself individually about each of these 6. There'll be in a matrix along the side about how you believe you're moving in your work. And the real key is here not to convince other people that we're on the right side, and that's a double entendre, but to look at our own consciousness. Because I assure you, I've been working in this way for 60 years, and every morning I start over and get used to overcoming my conditioning and being able to put my mind to work. The good news is I've learned how to do that. The bad news is I'm a part of a culture that very few are on it. So then we'll put you in a breakout and you can talk about what you see primarily for yourself. If you talk about the world outside, it's like starting in the wrong place, as you'll see. All right, so here we go. And then we're gonna, in about 5 more minutes or so, be in a breakout to play with these. Here's the first one. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, in order to think for ourselves and to be able to make the difference we want, we have to move out of self-actualizing into system-actualizing. And Maslow actually didn't create the idea of self-actualizing, and neither did Native people only. It was created in many places at one time because it was obvious. But if you look at the most evolutionary version of it, it moves into system-actualizing. So what does that mean? Self-actualizing is quite self-centered. It's about my life, me doing well, me being accomplished, me being recognized, me being a leader. And usually has a lot of authoritarian hierarchy built into it. The focus can, if it moves to system actualizing, it means that every time I work for the manifestation of a whole system and its innate potential and its aspiration and its ability to express itself in the world. So think about the children in your household. Maybe all the adults now. I like the gray heads in the picture. So when we're thinking about developing children when they're young, if we're looking for how we look, because of how children behave, we're in self-actualizing. If we raise them to be happy and successful, we're in self-actualizing. If we look at the system in which they're embedded, their ability to help make a difference for all that life is about, and learn to see the system at work, then we're in a system actualizing. That's what happens when you get to a regenerative self-determining epistemology. You never make sense out of it as a small piece. You always look at the system in which it's embedded. And knowing how to do that, we're not going to get to today, but it's a big part of our work. So take a moment, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. And again, it's not where you are, but where you're trending. And I always draw a little arrow when I do. I'm moving this direction. Sometimes I also do one for the system of which I'm working with and get a sense of, is it trending toward self-actualizing work or toward system or below that. I didn't create anything to the left of this, but there are things. So take a moment, write a note to yourself. Then we'll go to the second discipline. It's helpful if you take examples rather than generally evaluate yourself. Say, I have this project or this client, and my design is trying to move toward system actualizing. I can see that, but very much of what we have to do is self-actualizing. So you can talk about those examples. All right, let's look at the second discipline. Orient ourselves to becoming. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, mostly we orient toward being happy, being content, being personally satisfied in the world, having the ability to pay our bills. And that process is what I call working on being. And the primary goal of it is to have myself be taken care of. But with becoming, we place our attention beyond ourselves. And we again work on developing our will, our inner will, our personal agency, our ability to focus, to use our intelligence and grow our intelligence, and to work with different levels of energy to generate more aliveness in the world and create new structures and new effects. So the idea of I see so much that's in the well-intended world, I call it, sustainability. People who claim they're doing regeneration, circular, all the things that are well-intended. I see that often they don't have the becoming aspect without developing ourselves every day in community, working on our own development. We can't really do the work we need to do. We keep making it out there. So the big shift here is going from out there doing work on it to starting with ourselves and doing work on us. So rank yourself 1 through 5, trending and intending to move. And again, think about examples. And we'll do a third one of the 6 in a breakout, which will stay in about 30 minutes. And then we'll come back and share our learnings and discoveries, and which I've got a set of questions that we'll then dialogue about. All right, the last of the 3 is to move from a fragmenting world to ability to work with the whole. Right now, externalizing effects is a fairly significant problem. David Bohm, the great physicist who was Einstein's colleague, said the real problem that quantum mechanics shines a light on is our view and work of science, which is fragmented, chopping it up, making it into parts and pieces, and the inability to see wholes at work. So we can't even look at a tree and see it as a tree in a forest, or see a bear having dinner in the water because that's its dinner table. all we can see is bears as a classification and different kinds of trees, and also looking at limbs and roots. And if David Bohm loved to walk people over to a tree and say, show me where the entity here changes from a limb to a leaf. Show me exactly. And of course, they can't do that because, but they would do in their mind, chop it up. So with scientific method, as I said earlier, we learn to isolate objects, and we're trying to make it non-complicated by trying to control variables. I study one thing and not another, hold everything else still, resulting in answers that are oversimplified and decontextualized, and of course, fragmented, where quantum physics helps us see that even observing something exerts an influence. Now, there's a really good example of this. If you can learn to watch yourself, I mean, we'll all kind of make a mess sometimes of sorry. So we're trying to engage with our kids. If we could learn to watch ourselves when we're and observe ourselves, it will change how we perform. If we don't and we're just doing our usual self, what we do is to be our automatic self. And it's one of the most powerful things we can learn to do in the world. The observing our own thinking and behavior changes it. We teach schools and businesses how to work as a value adding process so they can see it as a whole. So, for example, a school that is thinking working from a garden or a farm, and they're serving the local town and the families who are part of it. They do all the education about what it takes for that value adding process to work. You learn how the whole works and not how water works and seeds and soil, all of which are fragments. So if we learn to do it this way, we have much more of overcoming the problem of externalizing things because we can't figure out how they connect. We have an upcoming annual summit. I'll tell you about it at the end on fooding as a value adding process because we're right now fragmenting farming, even regenerative farming, and not seeing it as a value adding process. All right, so we're going to go into breakout groups for half an hour. I'm going to go back to this exercise. And now, Ken, if you would make multiple people able to access the slide share, they can see this when they're in the breakout room. So have you got people set up to work, Ken?
I have the breakout room set up. I'm not sure I can allow people to access this, however. Can you grab the text out of that and just paste it into the chat? It will show up in the breakout rooms. Are you able to do that?
I'm sure I can. I just have to.
You'll have to get out of presentation mode.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
I have fingers that don't work very well too. So here we go. Now you can't see the chat when you're in the breakout. So you could also take a picture, a screenshot of this exercise, which is usually what my communities do. And then we'll be back at about 15 minutes past the hour and talk to each other about what was changing for us. I put up here something we can talk about in a minute about how you can follow up if you want. but I would love to hear reflections either in the chat or verbally, which are the following nature, and this is very important. I don't find that having conversation about subjects changes the world. It's just ideas flying around. What does change the world is reflection on our own disruption, our own growth and development and evolution. So I would like to hear about out of that conversation and our hour together so far. What is changing for you? What is moving? What is disrupting you? Could someone reflect on that? I don't answer questions, as I said earlier, that's nonsense. But hearing how people are evolving from engaging is the most interesting thing. Can someone offer a reflection on your own shifting and moving?
And again, if you would use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, that'll stack you up in queue. And Carol, I'll let you choose people as you go.
I can't do that. I can't pay attention. My hands don't work.
Got it.
That'd be great.
I'll do that. So Jan Ballard, you go first, and then Judith.
Okay, thank you. Carol, it's just so awesome for you to share with us today. And you and I have talked over the years on occasion about whole systems philosophy. And I think what's changing for me is that I'm doing a lot more meditation and sitting and reflection, and it's helping me to be more present with the whole dynamic. I feel like I'm experiencing life more completely in some way. I'm picking up emotional tones and things from others that used to not be obvious for me. So I'm self-actualizing as I actualize systems. Thank you.
And again, if anyone else can speak on what happened in the last hour, is anything more moving or awakening for you? Who was the next? Ken?
Judy. Judy, you're muted.
Judith, you're on mute. Can you turn your mic on?
Apologies.
Okay. And then after you.
I think we were very much in the sort of existentialistic, spiritualistic mode in terms of observing ourselves and observing others and not trying to impose a framework on it, but trying to understand or feel or sense what was occurring. So it was very both individualistic and collective, because you're part of something at almost all times, unless you live as a hermit somewhere. Right. And that was kind of, we spent a lot of time talking around that and through that and different dimensions of it. But there's definitely a spirituality aspect to it that leads to continued self-reflection, but not about tangible objects, about process and about people and about things that are changing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judith. Heather, please.
So, Carol, to stay with your request about the last hour, so much is up for me that I'm just overflowing right now in this moment with childlike joy, wonderment, and awe at the beautiful gift of being a human being alive on planet Earth in this moment in time, when so much is at stake, and that what you're putting forward as a framework is so critical to our survival as human beings on planet Earth. I feel an enormous gratitude for the gift of you and for the gift of life.
Hello.
Yes, Carol, thank you so much. This is so helpful. I had the pleasure of reconnecting with Jeff Trotter, whom I knew in a past life as consultant myself. And I noticed that maybe it's the influence of a lot of reading and watching indigenous wisdom that I'm moving more toward the 5 on especially on the whole at work and becoming. And we both reflecting on the importance of language, that English is very noun-based language. You know, it has a lot of verbs too, but most indigenous languages are made of verbs. So the process part is more important. You are in process, you're changing. And that's something that I'm more aware of as I work mostly with elders now, helping them through what we call a regenerative elder process. And helping them regenerate their worldviews. And we find that indigenous wisdom is very helpful in that, because it's asked us to actually be and experience something that is different than we normally experience, especially with nature.
So my grandfather was half Mohawk, and so I grew up. And from the time I was about 7 until he died when I was a late teenager, who constantly came in as a restraining force to non-indigenous cultures, to my white family. And it probably was one of the most important influences in shaping what I see and how I see it. So thank you for reminding all of us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ken, who do we have next?
No one's got their hand raised at the moment.
Okay.
But I'll throw a question out that came up in my group, and I know you said you weren't going to do Q&A, Carol, so I'll see if others might want to bite on this one. But
I don't actually want to change the field to Q&A. I'd like to keep. How about if you personally reflect on what was coming up and evolving in you as you were in a breakout? That would keep our field the same.
Okay. We were exploring, what does a 5 look like? And we came up with a couple of people that we could point to that thought were 5s who were good role models for us. But no one in our group rated ourselves a 5 on any of the scales. We had a couple of 3s, a couple of 4s, and that raised the question of what does a 5 look like? So
the real question was, you moving toward it. Did you feel like you could see your own evolution? Because I don't think any of us ever get to a 5 in some sense. Did you have any examples of moving toward it?
Yes, we did. Each of us thought that we had made significant, because I was in a room with people who were age peers for myself, so we're all gray-haired, and we all felt that, compared to where we used to be, we're way beyond where we used to be.
Right. So, Gil, I was going to turn it over to you guys to do a little pulling together your experience of being here and offer, unless someone else wants to offer
we do have
comment.
We do have a few other hands up. We're also close to time. Carol, do you want to go longer, or you want to stop at the bottom of the hour? What would you like to do?
I can go a few minutes longer, but not too long. So I'll follow your lead.
So let me take the 4 hands that are on the screen right now and ask you each to be very succinct in respect of time here. Jessica, and then Jeff.
Thanks, Gil, and thank you, Carol. It's lovely to share the space together. You said a word around decontextualization as part of fragmenting, and it made me think a lot about transcontextual as a way of exercising this exercise. And so my first step was, putting a number on the board, but then I started asking myself, well, maybe this is how I'm seeing my development in a work context, but what about in a family context? Or what about in an economic context or a political context? And so that was helpful to just ask the question through multiple lenses and see where I was over-indexing or more likely to sit, and then where I was overlooking.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff Perlman.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing this. And I think that we had a good conversation, and I think that the paradigms and moving to the regenerative paradigm, I think, is really powerful. I think that when it comes to this, you know, I don't know, call it dichotomy of self versus system or fragmentation versus whole, I guess I'm struggling a bit with why you would want to be a 5. Because it seems to me that like sometimes you do need to really focus in on a piece of something or yourself as part of a system, right? And so there's the and like I understand the importance of understanding the whole and the system and the context, but if you need to, like, one of the guys is working on a something where you need to figure out the finance, you need to work on the financing of this thing you're trying to do. You got to like focus in on that and work on that, and then zoom back out and see how does that fit in with the whole. But I guess I feel like you need both. That you don't only want to be at if you're only at the system level or the whole level, it's completely overwhelming.
Well, I should have, I obviously don't have time to do much, but these are nested to me, not really on opposite ends. And you always can see aspects of things moving, but within a whole. So the book explains that better. I shouldn't have done, I'll never do that line again. I can hear there was a mistake. So forgive me, and thanks for commenting so I could reflect on my own choices. All right, couple more people.
Good. Yeah, 2 more, Lloyd and then Lisa, and then I'll wrap us up quickly.
Okay.
Lloyd, please. Oh. Lloyd, turn your mic on.
That does help, doesn't it? Where I find myself moving through my life is from a place of certainty, which is a closed box when I was much younger, and moving into a place of possibility, which is a completely open energy field. And one thing I'd like to mention, Jeff, which was a lot of our discussion in our small group, was talking about Ian McGilchrist's work, who talks about the divided brain, and that all animals have divided brains. They have the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, and both of them are necessary to survive in the world. You're always using both of them, but they do the same thing, which is to create a picture of reality, and from that we could create a story. But how they do it is very different, and the left brain is singularly focused, and the right brain is able to see the whole. And again, this is a metaphor, this is not a model.
Right.
And a classic example, I loved Einstein's quote that intuition is our greatest gift. The intellect is a wonderful servant, but we have made the servant our master.
Right. Thank you.
Lloyd, thank you. Lisa, last up.
Hi, thank you. Let me just lower this hand. I so appreciated throughout the process, Carol, you seeding the conversation with the inquiry around how we listen with young people, or how we are observing ourselves. And the title of Living Between Worlds comes to mind, of this skill and this art of being in relationship, especially as what we are seeding to be generative and both a structure and a process for young minds in a really interesting time of evolution for this species, or opportunity. And I'm questioning whether it is a devolution, but certainly an ending of one thing and many things, and moving, like you said, to transformation. So I'm just interested in that, living between worlds, between species, between so many apparent differences. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Lisa, thank you so much. Carol, let me just start with my first personal reflections in response to what you asked. I was very struck and moved in this breakout, as well as in your whole presentation. I was surprised by the liminality in the breakout conversation. I did my rankings, and the numbers didn't stay fixed on the page; they kept moving.
Right.
I would write it down; it would move. It was like it was like a cartoon almost. The number would move under my hand. The trend is this way. The trend is that way. It started to reveal some of the complexity of the dance that I'm in right now. So that was one thing. The tenderness and the sense of wonder as we shared together was very palpable. Both in the breakout and in your presentation and the book, you made a great gift for me into my work because I lean toward the systems, the whole, but I'm held somehow by the ways that I've been in the life that I've grown up in. So I will plan and design a meeting. And, you've thrown us into meeting with very minimal plan. One of my teachers, Fernando Flores, likes to say that he's never more than 60% prepared for anything he does. Kind of in a similar spirit. And this is maybe even a lower percentage than that. So it's an invitation to me to just kind of step out in trust and trust that whoever is there in the room with me, as we all did, has something to offer and things to share and discoveries to share. Jane and I were watching a documentary last night on the jazz saxophonist Wayne Shorter, who passed away recently. And a wonderful story about somebody just constantly stepping into the unknown with an ensemble of other people who are stepping into the unknown together and making magic together. So I really thank you very much for the gift, for the opening of this. Let me say, if in lieu of you saying it, a reminder that Carol's book, No More Gold Stars, was just released. It's available in multiple formats. She's got several deeper programs available. I don't know, Carol, you had a slide you might want to put up about that. And before you do, I'll just remind people that Living Between Worlds meets on the third Wednesday of every month from noon Pacific to 1:30 Pacific time. We'd love to have you join us. We will send you out an email with a notice once the video is posted this week or early next week. That'll include a reminder of the link to register. You can register ahead for multiple months, and we'd love to have you back. And Ken posted in the chat a link to an online forum where people would like to discuss things further about this conversation. I imagine there's a bunch of stuff bubbling for many of you. Take a look at that in the chat. We'll also send out a reminder for that in the email. And with that, I'll just say thank you very much to all of you for being here, for your presence here and what you've shared. And Carol, do you want to tell people about your programs?
Well, I have communities and then I have summit. I put, if you're in the world of fooding, we have our annual summit whereby I take regeneration and challenge a current subject that I think is not filled with errors. Like we did racism 2 years ago, democracy last year. And so we put a different lens to give people practice. This year we're doing fooding as a value-adding process. And my new, it's not that new now, Substack journal, where we take a subject, there I believe there's an error in thinking that I draw on behaviorism, logical positivism, scientific method, and humanism, and show how I think we get errors from them being our sourcing. So if any of those interest you, I'd love to. If you want to talk, you always email me at carol@carolsanford.com. And thank you all for coming and your patience over my stammering around and how much I enjoyed listening to your reflection. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing